Welcome back, baseball fans. 1972-75 carryover league. This is your World Series preview video. Kind of going to go through an overview before we play this thing. The Cincinnati Reds and the Oakland A's. They played in a World Series 2 years ago. Would have been the 70 to 73 card collections in that carryover league. And the Reds outlasted Oakland in 7 games, winning Game 7 at home in Cincinnati. So the Oaklands have revenge on their mind. This technically is the first year within the dynasty years to repeat history. For Oakland, at least, they could still win 3 World Series. But with the competition in the carryover league, we think it's extremely more difficult for that to happen. But right now, the Reds and the A's have demonstrated that the top 2 teams in the carryover league. We'll start the analysis here for your preview. We're going to go look at how the teams got here. So let's back up and look at Cincinnati first. So there was a slim chance they could have been knocked out in the tournament as early as the first round, as they were in second place. And the Cardinals needed a miracle to knock Cincinnati out. They didn't get it. The Reds beat the Cardinals 3 out of 4 to go 4 over 500. Also staying in second place while the Pirates were stumbling against their competition, the Cubs, and then in Colorado, and falling into third. So 3-1 in the postseason for Cincinnati at that point, put them 4 over 500. Then again in the next round, they beat the Arizona Diamondbacks 2 straight, so now they're 6 over 500. And then in the last round of the tournament, trying to win the division, they dispatched the Phillies in a single game, while the Cubs struggled a bit. And in a tiebreaker, the Reds had the tiebreaker over the Cubs, so they actually got to first place. And they did that by ripping off going 7-1. Or they were 1 game over. They went 7-1, so they added 6 to their 1-loss record. So with that, then they got a bye in the playoffs, which is 7 over 500. They would play the Cubs, but then they dispatched the Cubs 4 games to 1. Now they're 10 over 500, and they're 11-1 since this tournament started. And in the League Championship Series, they dispatched Atlanta 4 straight. So if you're counting all that up, they were 16-15 at one point. Your Cincinnati Reds, the Big Red Machine, is 30-16. They've won 14 out of 15 games when it matters the most to get to the World Series. They've been destroying the opponents in their path. So we know this card set for the Reds is capable of just crushing their opponents in this era. And they finally kicked it into gear. The first 30 games of the year, pretty average, but the next 15, absolutely unstoppables. Can they continue that against the Oakland A's? Let's take a look at the A's. They were the best, and still are, the best record in the game. As the postseason tournament started, Oakland needed to dispatch the Texas Rangers. They quickly did 3-0, and that put them 14 over 500, 22-8. Then after that, they had a battle of top seeds with Baltimore, and Baltimore would have had to beat Oakland 5 straight to take the top seed away. Oakland got rid of Baltimore in a single game, 1-0, so they're 23-8. And have the best record in the league and enjoy a bye. So they don't have to play in the wild card round. In the divisional round, Oakland would play Texas again for the 3rd time. So you're wondering, level of competition Oakland's playing. They play Seattle, California, Texas 3 times this year. They dispatched Texas 4-2. They're now 17 over 500. The most difficult test all year is the League Championship Series against the Chicago White Sox. They beat them 4 games to 2, so they bring a 31-12 record into the World Series. Better than Cincinnati's 30-16 record. Oakland has home field with games 1, 2, 6, and 7 in Oakland, and the middle 3 in Cincinnati. Let's look at some stats. Starting with Cincinnati. What a difference a season makes. They got knocked out last year. See if I can bring up the team stats in 2023 quickly for you. So yeah, last year this team, look at this, 15-19. I guess historically maybe you can consider that to be the year between the 1970 and 72 World Series when the Reds stumbled a bit. Maybe that's the take here. But they were 15-19, a 2.53 average, a 4.49 ERA. Looking for bright spots here, not seeing many. Bench was down to just 8 homers, 24 RBIs, and a 2.66 average. Nobody in double digits there. They still had Tommy Helms at second base. Maybe they would need to trade for Joe Morgan, is the scenario here. Nobody. Pete Rose at 275 to lead the club. Bobby Tolan, 267. Gary Nolan was still effective. Didn't get the pitch enough. Don Gullett, your ace. Folks, 3-6, 75 innings, 5.64 ERA, 1.63 WHIP for your ace. The bullpen, two of the guys, Strickland and Bourbon, terrible. Clay Carroll fell off. They acquired Steve Busby as an experiment because the Royals weren't going to use him, and the Reds said, well, maybe we can control him. And he was pretty mediocre, and they let him go in the offseason. They traded Ross Grimsley in the offseason, even though he was effective. But the present stats for Cincinnati. They're hitting 291 this year. The ERA is down to 421. I know you're going to say, oh, that's not really good either. But you got to remember, they play a lot more competition against the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Chicago Cubs, Cardinals, and National League. So they just have to be in a lot of high-scoring affairs. Plus, they score a lot of runs, so they're willing to leave their pitchers in there to get knocked around a bit because they have huge leads. They have scored 273 runs in 46 games, giving up 201 runs. Bench should have been in a tie for MVP, but with Willie Stargell, but Stargell got the MVP nod this year. That's okay. Bench has won at least 2 other MVPs in previous years. The 16 homers and 49 RBIs are all second to Stargell. But Bench at 360, turning it on in this tournament, heating up. And if they gave out the awards now, you'd give the MVP to Bench over Stargell, but we give them out after the regular season. So you have George Foster added to this roster with 346 batting average. Pete Rose got his average up to 324 after hitting 264 at the All-Star break. I got to flip down to Morgan wherever he is. So Morgan is now a respectable 264. You'd think the on-base would be over 400, but it's not quite, 396, because he started so terribly for this team. He was hitting 212 at the All-Star break and looked like a bust. But there's no way that 1975 Joe Morgan card was going to be down for long. 31 stolen bases as well. And another interesting surprise is Dave Concepcion went to the All-Star game, and not just as a great defensive shortstop who could hit a little bit. Dave drove in 35 runs in 45 games, often batting 6th, 7th, 8th down there, and guys ahead of him getting on base, and he would knock them in with doubles, a couple triples, and 6 home runs. So Concepcion did a nice job. Actually, you could say he outperformed Tony Perez at 270. He had in an okay year. Geronimo struggled a little bit. And the pitching staff, Gary Nolan, continues a hot run with that 72 card. He was the 1973 Carryover League World Series MVP when they beat Oakland, as he won both his starts. There was a bunch of guys that could have tied for that award, but we gave it to Gary Nolan as the World Series MVP. He pitched good last year, you saw, and he pitched good again this year. Clay Carroll has returned to form with 11 saves and a 180 earned run average. Don Gullett still has not had a winning record in the last couple of years. He's now the number 2 instead of the number 1, but he's been okay. Fred Norman has been getting a lot of wins with run support. Again, just very average middling. Jack Billingham's stats look really bad because he's been involved in a couple blowouts this year, getting knocked out in the 3rd inning, giving up 8, 9, 10 runs, so that's going to inflate the ERA. He's had a couple nice starts to balance it out, but overall, the numbers don't look very good. Brabone's got 4 Vulture wins, 4-0, but still high earned run average for your Cincinnati Reds. Now let's take a look at the Oakland A's path here. We saw their path. Let's take a look at the Oakland A's stats then. So for the A's, here we are, 31-12. When we'll go look at what happened a year ago. Last year they got knocked out in the divisional round by Baltimore, and then the Tigers beat Baltimore in the League Championship Series to go to the World Series. So Oakland is they didn't miss the playoffs a year ago. They just fell short trying to get back to a World Series. So this is the in-between year for Oakland. Remember, they went to the World Series and lost 2 years ago. Then this is last year, 29-22, hitting .272, .348 earned run average. Kenny Holtzman was the big star last year, 8-1 with .304 ERA, and Catfish Hunter, just a .500 record, but a .305 ERA. Great stats. Vida Blue, one of the reasons they traded him is once you get past the 1971 season, he's never going to be that dominant again. He'll be a great starter for the rest of the decade, early 80s. But 1971 was a ridiculous year for Vida, and he started to struggle finally. For the offense, you did have Reggie leading the club, 11 home runs, 36 RBI, a lot of stolen bases, great defense. Campaneris stole 17 bases. Tennyson 7 homers. I'd be willing to live with a .212 average if I can get enough on base. 363. I guess that's enough on base. But just 20 RBIs in 50-some games, that's not good. A .272 average, but they scored 230 runs, gave up 198. So I guess you'd call this a slumping version of the Oakland A's. So let's look at the present stats. .277 average, but the team ERA is .327. There's 31-12. And look at the return to Catfish Hunter. The Cy Young winner this year. Yeah, he's getting run support, but he's pitching fantastically. But 13-1 is 13-1, no matter how you want to take it. The 5 complete games could have been 10 complete games if we really wanted to. We just decided to rest them because they were beating up their opponents. We had pulled them often after 7 innings. But just 116 innings pitched to get 14 decisions, 13-1. You know, had this been a full 162 game slate at this rate, you're talking about, you know, a 25, 27 game winner. You know, like what was it? Bob Welch did that for the '89 Oakland A's, something like that. You know, just a ridiculous amount of victories there. While Kenny Holtzman is on a tear now after 2 years. He's 17-4 over 2 years. And they were willing to let go of Vida Blue and just roll with these 2 guys and then cross your fingers with Don Wilson, Al Downing. Well, I call this mixed results because they started much worse than this. But Wilson's and Downing have had good, decent starts, I'll call them, in the playoffs. So maybe they're starting to turn it around a bit. If you want a closer, you got him. You got Fingers, 15 saves, .083 ERA. Bob Locker, the righty who gets lefties out, 53 cents. You know, Hamilton and Todd. There's not much. You can't really throw anything at these Oakland A's. They've got it all on the pitching. And as far as offense goes, Reggie's numbers, he's starting to tail a little bit, but he's also looking around and seeing his other teammates starting to pick this thing up a little bit. So that's a good thing. He doesn't have to carry them anymore. Plus, they've only played 43 games, so the stats aren't going to be eye-popping here. Meaning that they've been getting series done much sooner than best of 7s, best of 5s, best of 3. They've been wiping teams out, so you're not accumulating high stat totals. So Reggie's hitting 286, 733. Gene Tennis now is up to 10 home runs. Got the average up to 272. Interesting, he got the average up, but the on base went down just a little bit. Keep expecting it to be over 400. Speaking of over 400, you got to talk about Mike Hegan. The Mike Hegan card of 1972, one of the many first basemen they employed that year, combined with Don Mincher and Mike Epstein. I don't know how he have 3. All 3 of those guys are in the carryover league and starting for different teams. just so they all get playing time. But Oakland decided to keep Hegan for the batting average. He's got power, has homers on his card. Didn't hit one at first base. First baseman with no home runs. He's like the Rod Carew without speed or something. I don't know how to describe that. But a 364 average. He hits lefties fine. 405 on base. Bando, steady as usual. Claudel Washington, not terrible. Decent. 269. That's good. Joe Rudy actually was much worse than this. Campaneris was much hotter than this. I think Campaneris was around 300 and fell down to 269, whereas Rudy was hitting like 220, 230 and brought it up to 265. So we'll see how that continues in the World Series. And that's a look at the stats of the two squads. We'll look at the rotations and then the starting lineups for Game 1. So, Game 6 of the League Championship Series, Oakland played the White Sox, and Kenny Holtzman pitched, which meant that Kenny was not available for a Game 1, which is fine because Catfish Hunter's going to pitch Game 1. This is the opportunity where your ace can pitch 3 of the 7 World Series games, 1, 4, and 7, because we're going to have days off in between 1 and 2 and between 6 and 7. So Hunter is pitching Game 1, there's a day off, and then Holtzman comes back for Game 2. In the case of the Reds, they're skewing this a little bit for an interesting reason. They're going with Gary Nolan. I know he's the ace, but Gary Nolan is one of the 2 pitchers who cannot pitch on 3 days rest for the Reds. Gullett, Billingham can. Fred Norman, Nolan cannot. But they want Gary Nolan to pitch as much as possible because his card has been the most effective for 3 years running now. So they max it out by having him pitch Game 1, and on 4 days rest, he'll pitch Game 5. In between, it'll all set up nicely for Gullett to go in 2, Billingham 3, Fred Norman 4. So when you look at it, it's 4 consecutive pitchers. Nolan, Gullett, Billingham, Norman. Then you have Nolan, Gullett, and Billingham. Nolan could, depending on how he's used in Game 5, be available to come out of the bullpen into Game 7. Going back to Oakland, it is going to be Hunter, Holtzman. They're going to put Don Wilson in the 3, his 1 start. Al Downing in the 5, his 1 start, with Kenny Holtzman getting a 2nd start in Game 6 and Catfish Hunter Game 7. 2 great teams. Just to do this again is fantastic. I'll post a link to the World Series if you want to check that out. I'll put it in the comment section of the World Series I played a couple of years ago that went 7 games. It was incredible. But now let's get to your starting lineups for today's Game 1, and then we'll call it a video, and then we'll pick it up with the broadcast of the Game 1 coming up soon. So, leading off for your Cincinnati Reds is Joe Morgan. Morgan, 327, 17 homers, 132 walks, in 1975, an MVP performance for Joe. Batting second, another MVP, Pete Rose, 1973 National League MVP with a 338 average, 36 doubles. Great in left field. Batting third, Tony Perez, 73 card, probably the best in the timeline for him, a 314 average, 27 home runs, 33 doubles for Tony Perez. Batting fourth, your 1972 MVP, we got a lot of them, folks, on both teams. Johnny Bench, 1972, 40 home runs, 270 average, 100 walks. A magnificent Johnny Bench. Batting fifth, Don Mincher. Actually was in Oakland A. How do you beat the Oakland A's? You take their players. 72 Oakland, he hit 216, but he had 6 homers, 245 at-bats with 56 walks. Your classic homer walk strikeout performance, except he doesn't strike out. Even better. Batting sixth, third baseman Dennis Mankey, also acquired in the Houston trade. Just hit 191, but when you add in the 69 walks and 241 at-bats, you get like a 370 on-base percentage for Mankey. And he's good defensively everywhere in the infield. Batting seventh in right field, Bobby Tolan. We've run this card back for 4 straight years. Got a World Series ring 2 years ago with this card. 283, 8 home runs, and 650 plate appearances. He'll be left off the team next year to promote a spot for Ken Griffey to take over for him. Batting 8th, Dave Concepcion bats 8th on this team. 73, hits 287. The first year he's putting offense and defense together nicely. Not a 1 yet. He's still a 2 at short. Ace stealer, Dave Concepcion. Batting 9th in center field, Cesar Geronimo, 74, a 281 average. You could play him against lefties and righties. You don't have to take him out. He can hit lefties reasonably. And one of the best arms in center. Not a -5 yet. He'll get that -5 arm with next year's card. On the bench, you've got reserve catcher Bob Barton. Did that role with the Reds and then with the Padres in 74. Just 81 at-bats and a 235 average, but good on base versus lefties. Rod Gilbreth actually was an Atlanta Brave in 73 with 74 at-bats. As a utility infielder, hit 284. Also hits lefties pretty well. And the final guy is George Foster. Foster doesn't even get to start. That's how deep this Red team is. 75, 300 average, 23 home runs, 500 plate appearances. They got to make room for Foster and Griffey and Geronimo in the outfield and get Rose in the infield, but that might still be delayed because Rose has got an MVP card in 1973 in left field with a 1 defense. So you could see the reluctancy to take Pete out of left field there. All right, and now the Oakland. Let me announce the Reds starting pitcher too. Gary Nolan, like I said, starting game 1. Gary Nolan, 15-5 with a 1.99 ERA and 176 innings with this card. Was a World Series MVP 2 years ago. And they are not afraid to leave this guy in there and battle for wins. Cincinnati's very effective. Oakland, let's get through the Oakland lineup here. Leading off, Claudell Washington. In 1975, has his best year of the decade. 308, 10 home runs, 630 plate appearances. His defense isn't there. They don't have Bill North. He's not on the team, so Claudell has to play center in his place. Batting second, shortstop Burkamp and Harris, a great 74, a 290 average, 47 walks, and a lot of them versus righties. Good to see him finding additional ways to get on base. Great base stealer, of course, bunter, etc. Burkamp and Harris. Batting third, the great Mike Hegan card. So he only had 76 plate appearances, hitting 329. We nearly doubled that with the Oakland A's. You know, purists will say, hey, you're overusing this guy's card. Well, look at all the Oakland A cards that were taken away from them, including Bill North and Paul Lindblad and Dave Duncan and Ray Fosse and Mike Epstein and Don Mincher on your opponent you're playing in the World Series. So the A's can keep, have a protection list, but just they can't protect everybody. And decided to go for Hegan. Now you got Reggie, batting cleanup. 32 home runs, 293 average, your 1973 American League Most Valuable Player, a stealer, 2 with a -5 arm. Those are traits he would not bring to the Yankees later in the decade, at least defensively and base stealing. He doesn't have the Yanks, but he's got plenty of that here with Oakland. Next, batting 5th, Joe Rudy. His best year in the dynasty years of 72. 01 E2 in left field. 305 average, 19 home runs. Batting 6th, third baseman Sal Bando. 29 dingers, a 286 average. His best year. They are cherry-picked for mostly their best years in the timeline with this particular card set. Hey, it makes sense. 72, 73, 74, the 3 World Series years. And then 75, you got Claudell Washington's card. So it makes sense that they'd be cherry-picked to fit their stars, get the stars aligned. Batting 7th, nice little free agent Steve Ontiveros. Was a San Francisco Giant in 74, hit 265, 400 plate appearances. Switch hitter, likes to get on base, mostly a third baseman, could play a little bit of the outfield utility sort of thing. Eventually he plays for the Chicago Cubs later in the decade. I think he plays for the Expos as well. Steve Ontiveros. Batting 7th, catcher Gene Tennis. 258 average, 24 home runs, 101 walks. Just a zero-arm catcher. That'll be tested mightily by Joe Morgan and Bobby Tolan in this series. So good luck to Tennis on that. And batting ninth, second baseman Dick Green. He would get World Series rings 3 times. Here is the best year in the timeline for him. 72, he gets hurt, has a good batting average, 286. 74, he hits 213. In between 1973, Dick Green's hitting 262. He's a 2.88 second baseman, has power against lefties, even though he had just 3 home runs. And the rest of Major League Baseball goes, thanks Strat-O-Matic for giving Dick Green power when he probably shouldn't have gotten it, but they gave it to him. So there you go. That's the starting lineup for the A's. And the starting pitcher for Oakland with an incredible 13-1 start and Cy Young. Catfish Hunter. 1972, he was 21-7 with a 2.04 ERA and 295 innings. So he only would have to go 8-6 the rest to increase the number of games played to get that 1-loss record. And he would have to do that. Could get 180 innings to do that because he's got 113 right now. So Catfish Hunter, Gary Nolan, Game 1. So that'll be it. We'll have Game 1 up soon, and the World Series will get underway. That's your World Series preview. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you tune in, and we'll see you next time.